What's going on, everybody? This is Main Event Memories presented by ProWrestlingWire.net and, of course, available on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcast. Rick Del Santo here, and joining me is Jon Peck. Once again, due to the success of the wonderful Super Clash show that we did last week, John is back. We had a wonderful broadcast last week, and I appreciate everybody listening. And it's been bringing us down the adventurous road of reviewing classic wrestling content. John, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, Rick. Thanks for having me back again. It was fun talking about that event, Super Clash, and then pretty soon we'll get on to Super Clash 2.
Yep.
And then we'll build up to the best one eventually. So we'll
Super Clash 4
gradually,
exactly.
it's gradually getting better and better, right?
Yeah. Don't knock Super Clash 2. In 3,
we won't give any spoilers, but there's definitely one very good match.
Yes. And Super Clash 3, I think, is an underrated gem. If you ask me, it's a lot of the controversy that surrounds it that makes it one of the.
When we get there, I'll give you my thoughts. But I could just tell you this: at the time, I was so excited to see Kerry Von Erich versus Jerry Lawler. Seriously, like that was like a big deal. And the way I found out was about what we're going to talk about. What spiked it up.
And today's subject is wrestling magazines and their importance to our life in the 1980s. Of course, growing up in the 1980s, there was no internet whatsoever. The way we found out about things, folks, was through wrestling magazines, newspapers, telephone books. That's it. We couldn't even dial into a cell phone to look up somebody's number or Google. So, of course, we had to look at magazines, books, and the television. We had to wait for the nightly news to come on. There was no breaking news and such like that. So it was definitely, looking back 40, 50 years is definitely a very minimalistic time. But geez, man, I long for those days sometimes of the, the innocence that was the wrestling fan back in the day.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, there's a term. I don't know who said it, like Lou Albano. The only thing real in wrestling is the money in the miles, right? So
that makes sense.
So it's the same thing. If you're a wrestling fan back in this time period, that same thing, the money in the miles, we had to drive all over to get some of these certain magazines, right?
Yeah.
And memorabilia, any of that stuff. So, and the money. We can get into how, like advertisements.
Yes.
Found certain things, had to spend money, had to get money orders if we wanted them. I mean, that's how we got them.
Yeah, I mean, as our young youth, we didn't necessarily have bank accounts either, or checking accounts, etc., etc. Our parents had to do something, or write a check, or what have you. And a lot of times when before I had my first checking account, I'd get a money order. It actually was easier and faster to get a money order, to be able to go order such things like magazines and videos and stuff like that.
Yeah. So when did it start, Rick? I mean, the history is the first wrestling magazine, like in 1951 or so. That was actually
as far as that goes. I do have a list here of let me see here. And I have some dating back. And if you look on Wikipedia, which I do have open, but I made a list of a lot of the magazines that were popular off of this list during our era of the 1980s. So I'm going to scroll through this list because I know I did see some from the 1950s here. Of course, it's a very long list, so it's going to probably take me a year to find it. But
yeah. I mean, you don't have to go crazy, but it's the first. I don't know if the first published one might have started in like 46 as like a program though, which is like kind of doubled as a magazine you can only get at the events, right?
Okay,
and you couldn't get them at the newsstand, but only at the events, right?
Right here, I'm looking according to this list. Okay, I found what you were referring to. Wrestling as You Like It lasted from 1946 to 1955. It was monthly, and the side note says its earliest wrestling publication ever published, and was the only one active during the post-World War II years. Replaced by Wrestling Life in 1955.
Okay.
Yep. So this may be the one that you're referencing. And this one I've never actually seen. I don't know if there's any available through like collectible units like Whatnot and eBay and stuff like that. So this one might be, and then of course there's other ones like Wrestling Confidential that was 1964, and
Okay.
there's plenty of
Yeah,
others.
Wrestling and TV Sports Magazine. I don't know if you ever heard of that. That's another
Yep.
one. I guess that's the first mainstream
Yeah.
wrestling magazine. So
Yep. And the Wrestling News was 1959. It says 1959 to present, but
yeah,
that's it's more
yeah. You
so
can't.
a
Not everything.
podcast. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a daily podcast
Yeah.
out there by the Arcadian Vanguard network. But this was it apparently the original version of Wrestling News was eventually purchased by Arena Publishing in 2002 and published and republished as Wrestling Review back in the day. I don't know if you remember that magazine
Yes.
at all. So I used to read that in the 1980s into the early 90s as well.
All right.
Yeah. So do you remember, John, the first wrestling magazine that you ever purchased?
I want to say it's a WWF magazine.
Okay.
Which is a whole separate entity. Like,
yes.
When there's like the traditional ones, I think the first thing I think of is wrestling magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated or The Wrestler or something like that. And then so Vince McMahon said, okay, well, we're going to create our own magazine just to cover us. And if you follow WWF back then, Vince McMahon acted as if the only thing that existed was a WWF, nothing else. Nothing else ever got mentioned. Nothing else existed. So he was going to monetize this and then just promote his own company. And one of the things I used to love, besides reading the articles in there, was also ordering the merchandise. So they had T-shirts, towels, right? You can get a beach towel if you want. You get a Hulkamania painter's cap, right? You can get all these awesome items.
There's a whole pull-out catalog in the middle, and then if you opened it up, the literal centerfold would be all the T-shirts that they had available as well. Yep.
Yeah. I've got one here from September 1991.
Okay. Oh, I remember that one. I used to have that one. Yeah. It had Hogan and Warrior on the cover.
Looking on the back, so they're promoting a pay-per-view right on the back.
Yep.
So we're paying to buy more things. So that's what this whole thing is, right, Rick? We're buying this to say, oh, well, okay, now I got to buy this pay-per-view now. Okay, so like here's an interview with Randy Savage. He talks about marriage. Virgil trades blows with Kato. So we got some good stuff.
That's a weird issue to pull out. I think of that era. 1991 is it's a strange era for wrestling magazines, for the WWF magazines as well, because there's a lot of weird history that's kind of like when they were really getting away from
period almost, right? Would you say? It wasn't their top.
Definitely wasn't the best era. 1991 still has some quality. There's that painter's cap. Yep. There's the teddy bear, that Hogan USA poster. Yep. I remember that. So the WWF magazine's originally called the WWF Victory magazine.
Okay.
From its debut in 1983. And did you know that at one point they actually tried to get Bill Apter to come in and be the editor for that magazine as well?
And what happened? He didn't take the job, right?
He declined it. I think that his job with the other magazines were too
he was
profitable, well, or he was doing well. Yeah,
and he knew it was.
Oh, he would have had to move as well, from what I understand.
Yeah, and the other question is, would Vince McMahon have to wrestle him in his apartment to get the job?
I do have a note about that coming up at some point.
All right.
In that magazine. I don't think that, for me, the WWF magazine was not the first magazine that I purchased. I do remember I don't remember the name of the magazine. Okay. But I remember, I lived in Branford, Connecticut, and where I lived there on the opposite corner, there was a house and then another, and then the corner behind that there was like a convenience store. I remember buying the wrestling magazine. I just remember Greg the Hammer Valentine being on the cover, and I remember being at school reading it, and all the kids in school were like excited. So everybody, this was like an event type of thing. This was such a community thing where everybody would get together and read the wrestling magazines together. Like we'd all crowd over somebody that was reading it and look through the pictures and all this stuff, and everybody was excited. But of course, this was going back like 83 or 84, so everybody was a Hulkamaniac at that time period.
And at that age, you got to remember, is I don't know how your parents were. It's like pulling teeth trying to get my parents to buy me a magazine. I had to try and get my grandfather, could weasel it out of him sometimes, to buy a magazine.
Grandparents were always more influential in getting, or able to coerce into getting that $2 to $3 magazine.
But what I used to do, where I used to live in Hamden, Connecticut, and I used to go, there's 2 convenience stores that are walking distance to my house. One was AM PM. Do you remember that chain?
I remember those stores. Yeah.
Yep. To go there, but I got kicked out of there. I remember one of these says, "Boys," my brother, we go, "Boys, it's not the Hamden Library," because we'd be reading for an hour, not buying anything. So then we left, and then we go to Wawa, and they didn't care. We could read all day.
Is that what you got kicked out of there for just reading all day?
Not buying anything, just reading. Just sitting there reading the magazines. In everybody's way that's trying to buy stuff.
It was amazing because, you could go into convenience stores like that. Now I don't think they have magazines at all.
It's almost dead. I mean, it still exists, but it's not prevalent. Like it was.
And I think I spoke about this with Brian Solomon on his podcast recently, that we were talking about. It's like, really, at one point, like wrestling magazines, you can go to Barnes & Noble and you'd be able to find a ton of them, right? Mm-hmm. And now, or any convenience. I mean, I worked in Walgreens for a number of years, and we'd have like 4 or 5. But now it's like there's only like 2 to 3 in existence, but really there's only one in the United States, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And I think that, Inside the Ropes is a UK magazine. And I know there's one other, I can't think off the top of my head, but there's not a lot of wrestling publications, as print media is kind of gone downhill. I still buy Pro Wrestling Illustrated on occasion, just because for that history and that love for purchasing wrestling magazines.
I still have to look at it. I still have to look at it to see what's going on.
I mean,
for what they're covering, in particular.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, what was the so the first thing I did every time I opened up a wrestling magazine is I always went to the ratings and the results columns, just to find out. I wanted to find out about different territories. And of course, you could also find out stuff about different territories, like who's wrestling what. You'd see names that left your territory, whatever territory you would watch WWF. All of a sudden, you'd see them listed in Memphis or the NWA, or something that you didn't get on television. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the different magazines would cover different things. Like, you're right, some would have results from all over the world. So I got to see, oh wow, you haven't seen this wrestler in the longest time. Now he's in Texas now. So. Certain things, you had no idea what's going on, and you knew about this because of the wrestling magazines.
Yeah. And there was just something special about wrestling magazines as a whole. And I remember sometimes it's like Pro Wrestling Illustrated might have been the biggest one at the time, but it was
definitely was. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, to their standard and their quality, it's still in existence. So that's saying something right there. But there was also like a million other magazines that were associated through the same publishing company that today I just that I preferred some of the other magazines, whether it be Inside Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, Victory Sports Wrestling. New Wave Wrestling was actually one of my favorite magazines, which started in 1992 and closed down in 2004, which the reason why I like that is that magazine. And I'm sure I don't know if did you remember New Wave Wrestling at all?
I used to get it. I remember getting it at the time. You used to have like the American flag logo, right? If I'm not mistaken.
This one
next to it, New Wave.
No,
this was getting in the 90s. I remember Doink being on the cover of one.
Yeah, sometimes they would do things like take pictures of independent shows.
A lot of independent stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of independent stuff. Because they were, and I guess it was easier to get in touch with guys like Doink and stuff like that after they had left WWF and stuff. And they would cover things like ECW and all that stuff, but they would have advertisements in there that were and I think they sold like a lot of merchandise. Like they had a video library that they were selling themselves and stuff, were old collectibles or wrestling grab bags. But there was also one of the things about it was that they had like a fan section that you could this was always a big part in pro wrestling, and this is probably maybe how eventually found out about things like the Torch and the Observer, was that they had fan sections where people would advertise stuff like,
I've done that. I had to classify it before, and I would
yeah,
buy and
classifieds. Thank you.
sell wrestling figures and trade tapes.
Yep.
Got a wrestling catalog. I think it might have been through classifieds. Omar Delgado, was that
I
through a
remember.
wrestling
Yeah.
magazine? That was a big tape trader at the time. This is a great story. So we're Rick and I are learning more about just in the inside of wrestling, right? Like what's going on behind the scenes more and more. Like right in the early 90s,
As we get older, yeah, we started probably like 92, 93 as we were getting older, and wrestling became a little bit more it was a changing time for professional wrestling, but we wanted more information. The magazines, we knew, obviously, were very kayfabe, so and so we wanted more information, or we wanted to see wrestling that we weren't getting in that area, and that's what
so
brought us to tape trading.
So that was amazing in this catalog. I mean, getting tapes from Japan, I mean, Puerto Rico, just so that was. And do you remember this? He wouldn't put the name. He goes, whatever, Stan Hansen versus Jobber.
yeah, everybody was listening. If you weren't a named Jobber, it would just say Jobber. It wasn't like a Barry Horowitz or a Mike Sharp or somebody. It would just say Jobber next to it. Yes. Yeah.
This is another thing I want to show you, which was another important thing. I'm sure you looked at this because this is another one of the things that I was captivated by, and I had to know because this was changing from month to month. Okay, this is wrestling's main event. Were you a fan of this one, Rick?
I was, especially like the what year is that one that you have there?
86, I think.
Okay.
May 86. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. I actually think I still have a couple issues of that laying around. Sometimes that one's not necessarily that easy to find. You know what I mean? There's certain ones that are not as easy to find. Like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you could probably find all day long, like older issues.
Produce more, than some. But this is what I was very, very interested in looking at. One of the first things, the rankings.
Yes. Yeah. That was same as my myself. I didn't care about the most hated or the most popular. I didn't care about the world championship. I looked at the NWA, I looked at the AWA, World Class, and then and the funny part about this is, now mind you, I was just looking at I just picked up a newer issue of Wrestling All Stars from 1986, as Terry Taylor on the cover, and I went to it and I forgot that a lot of these magazines, like you said, carried Puerto Rico stuff. It was the ratings for WWC, which I completely forgot about, because at that time period, that was one of the most popular organizations in the world.
Yeah, I learned about that from the magazine. I'm sure you did, seeing the pictures of Abdullah and Carlos Colon bloody, and like, oh, I got to see these matches. I want to see this stuff.
Yeah, Hercules Ayala was always in those that same bearded picture with him with the belt on and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if you remember this at all. We went to we were at the Chiller Theater one year back in the day. Me and you used to go all the time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they would have tape dealers and stuff like that there. Yeah. And then one year we went there, a dude had like 3 tables of vintage WWC backstock
on clamshell VHS. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but I bought like 20 videos that weekend of that. And I got home and I'm watching guys like the Fantastics, Duggan, Al Perez, guys that I really, really liked that I saw in World Class, NWA, some guys from WWF, Terry Funk, all that stuff. And it was like very exciting, because to me, that was like probably early 90s, I think. And I'd not really seen much WWC other than what maybe the Savoldis had aired on their show, because they had a connection to them. This was my first real exposure to the World Wrestling Council, and I was just like kind of blown away at that time.
Oh yeah, yeah. You don't see that stuff every day, especially like a whole, booth full of these. You know? And then one year he actually got Abdullah to sign at his booth.
Yeah, now that happens all the time, or it did. I don't know.
But back then it was kind of,
there's still kayfabe. Yeah.
So yes, that was interesting. And this is the ads. I'm sure you're like me. You live for these ads to see what new merchandise. This is one of the greatest of all time.
Oh yes, the Bad Street USA album. Michael Hayes and the Bad Street Band. Yes,
I mean, you can get a bumper sticker. I mean, you can get the record. The satin jacket.
You want the towel or the poster with him laying down,
Poster for
covered
sure
by the
open the
rebel
hairy
flag.
chest.
Yeah. Well, so the
That's what
one that he's like laying down, it's got the stars and bars,
yeah.
which is they made that, and I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble with this, but very homoerotic
Oh, yeah, yeah.
picture. Yeah.
Here's another thing. If I don't know if you remember this, but this is too much money at the time. $79.95. These are common nowadays, but back then you get your own replica belt, just a generic replica belt you could buy.
You can buy a cheap replica one for about 125 off of Amazon.
Yeah, now, but back then this was
yeah.
it was impossible. Now they're dime a dozen replica belts, but back then, like, this was amazing that you can actually get one, and you can
Yeah.
even get a mail order bride.
Oh, look at that! Look at that!
I mean, these magazines were just more about wrestling. They literally had everything in here. They had these apartment wrestling VHS
Yes.
tapes were a very big. They were very big in these wrestling magazines. I think if my parents knew that this stuff was in these magazines, they might not let me look at them.
Well, sometimes if now I'm trying not to crack up here, but if you notice it, like it was like I did hear a podcast with like Bill Apter not so long ago in the last couple of years when he was thought about doing that, and they're like, "What? Why would you do that?" But he's like, it literally was like helping sell the magazines. It was like young male demographic that was buying the magazines with all these girls wrestling on it and putting it on the cover. And some of them were just that's just how the magazines took off and survived, because that's what was really doing it. So they continued to cover it, which is they sold the videotapes too, which to me, I was like, at that young age, I'm like, what the hell is this?
I was like, why are they wrestling in an apartment? Then male versus female. These women are all in bikinis. Like,
right.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't get this. This is so yeah, it was definitely an interesting time.
Yes.
But yes, look, you could even become a professional wrestler.
And
after that. So I mean, look, it's something we just covered. You could buy the VHS of that.
Yep. Oh, there you go. Super Clash 85 advertisement. How much is the video for that? Look at the price on that.
So this is what is
it's gotta be like
$40? $39.95.
That's it. Wow, that's cheap. Because a lot of times videos were still like $80 at that time period.
Wait a minute. Oh, wait. Is this 3 separate VHS tapes? So you have to buy 3 separate tapes for $95. I think that's
so. They're like an hour long. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Each,
so they pull a stunt. Yeah, so they pull the stunt if you want that.
The AWA was never good with that stuff because they only generated all their sales. Like when they did produce VHS tapes, they didn't produce a whole ton of them, but they sold them with they were either 30 minutes long or they were an hour long, if you remember correctly. Because I think we had a bunch of them. We used to be roommates back in the day, so we had a bunch of them at that time period.
Yep.
I'm trying to find
the back is one of Rick's favorite movies. It's advertised in the VHS of Grunt.
That's a great movie. I watched that. I watched that a couple years ago again. Refreshed my memory, and it was a lot of fun. I like watching. The funny thing about that is I get off subject. It doesn't matter. But watching old 80s, there was a bunch of movies that were influenced by professional wrestling in the 1980s as well, such as Body Slam, which to me that's like one of my favorite movies of all time.
Billy Barty was great in it.
Yeah, you get Dirk Benedict in it, and it's just a ridiculously fun comedy. You can watch it on Pluto, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So
but,
we should
do Adrian Street. I just wanted to say, it's just because that's in my brain now. Talk about Grunt. Another thing you can get, which you couldn't just like nowadays, you can go to highspots.com and get any of this stuff. You can get wrestling gear made by Adrian Street and Miss Linda in these wrestling magazines.
Yeah, they used to advertise the Bizarre Bazaar, right? Was their company? Yeah. And they used to sell belts as well, like custom made belts, didn't they?
Yep. Yeah, they sold their own belts, any gear you want, custom gear, masks, and he would sell VHS tapes of his matches. He'd make his own compilations of his matches, I think for Memphis, right? Mostly, I think.
Yeah, probably. I know he had a career there, a career in career with the Savoldis. He in Continental. He was in Continental a lot with the Fullers and stuff like that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of magazines. One of the magazines, like I told you, like during the Super Clash episode that we did, that I always looked forward to going to the newsstand in the Amity Shopping Center and by
Mhm.
near where we worked, which was within walking distance of my house in Woodbridge, Connecticut. And because I was started working for my father, I'd get an allowance. I was like 12, 13 years old helping him. He was a TV repairman. I was helping clean the TVs and helping him lift them and carry them and doing some shop maintenance and stuff. But every time I get paid, I want to go to the newsstand. And there was probably at one time, there's anywhere from like 10 to 15 different wrestling magazines available at the newsstand. And it was like, geez, which ones am I going to get today? And it was always like, one of my favorite magazines, and I'm sure you're probably going to remember this, was Wrestling Eye magazine.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So that one to me just turned out, there was a lot of fun because sometimes a lot of these, some of the after mags I really enjoyed, but some of the ones that were not after mags, I really had some enjoyment out of because they would always do something a little bit different that made me
Yeah,
more
they
interested.
showcase something there,
Yeah,
especially you and I like the independents, so you'd see more
yeah,
of that. Where again, you couldn't find this. It's very difficult to find stuff on the indies, compared to nowadays.
yeah.
This is one of my favorite issues.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Yep.
And this is just what we're talking about. Look at the back. This is what sold, right, Rick?
Is that the more apartment wrestling? Is that what
Yeah.
it
So
says? Yep.
this is
So I'm looking online and I found out. Did you ever visit archive.org?
yes.
It's the Internet Archive. So they got a bunch of the wrestling magazines scanned and net downloadable. So that should be a fun for anybody that's looking to not spend money buying all these things. So
And it's interesting now if you look at this, because at the time you didn't know who some of these wrestlers are. Like we're talking about the independent wrestling, right? Do you recognize anyone in this?
I can't see it that well. I do know Bobby Bold Eagle, the Wrestling Academy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A young Jason Knight.
Okay.
You see it
Yep.
with the flat
Yes.
top?
Yep. I actually spoke with Jason today for a brief period.
Okay.
Doing well. So
That's good. It's good to hear. But it's great seeing something like that.
yeah. I'm trying to think here. Wrestling Eye magazine started in 1986. Okay. And then I think it closed down in 1993. But one of the cool things about that is about the Wrestling Eye magazine was that, the pinups. Sometimes some of these wrestling magazines had pinups. Some of like the After mags didn't necessarily have them, but the other magazines had the pinups, and it was quite enjoyable.
I used to hang them up. Did you ever do that? Did you hang them up?
Oh
in your
yeah.
room?
Of course, I always had Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. Yeah, there you go. Nice centerfold of Roddy Piper. There you go.
But yeah, no, I remember having the Road Warriors. The best poster to me at the time was I thought it was the coolest thing. It was a Pro Wrestling Illustrated one. It had Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Rick Martel all together. I don't know if you ever saw that poster.
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Like a dream match is saying have them all three together, the three champions of 1985. But yeah, that was like my favorite poster on the wall.
Yeah. I'm now currently looking at the October 1986 edition of Wrestling Eye. It's got Magnum TA on the cover, stories and featured Magnum TA versus Tully Blanchard. They want to deport Colonel De Beers. All right. And there's those beautiful valets. And if I can blow this up, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. Right. So I can read this a little bit. The pinups is Chris Adams, Hulk Hogan, Big John Studd, Jimmy Snuka, and Kevin Von Erich. So that's a great lineup. So that's how good, like all these wrestling at that time, these guys were all superstars from all these different territories as well.
Yeah.
So, and Bob Backlund, a feature on Bob Backlund as well. So right, from 1986. So I don't know where the hell he was. Was he wrestling in 1986?
In 85 was he was like in. Is doing like Pro
Wrestling USA. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, I used to buy tons of them, and now I still I don't have the ones that I originally bought when I was a kid, but I did at one point in the last 5 years, I started buying magazines again, and I got lucky. I bought a collection off a guy, and then I bought another collection off another guy at a convention that was dumping them,
All
and
right.
which featured a lot of 60s and 70s ones. He was just like, he had 75 magazines, dollar each, but then he just wanted to get them rid of them, so he knocked them down.
All right. Good.
So yeah, and then I was just like, I got home and I was just like, I had more magazines than I actually left with, and it was just like, but looking back at it, it's not only it's like a time capsule to your childhood as well, to our youth, and looking at it, stuff that we watched on TV, and like I said, stuff that we didn't discover. And when we got older, of course, we started tape trading, and then of course it was message boards and all that other stuff. I remember, like you said, getting through the classifieds, learn people that were wrote fan newsletters and stuff like that, and that's how we found the Observer and the Torch and stuff like that. And then a couple like other shoddy ones that were um not as popular, but then people trying to sell tapes or trade tapes and stuff like that. So that opened up another world. And like you said, Omar Delgado. And I remember that's how we found Mark Herzog, that was based out of Connecticut as well, who had another amazing list, who I used to tape trades with. He was really big on those mid-Atlantic film tapes, which were just like, that were from the 70s and stuff like that.
Oh,
Were
okay.
just like amazing to watch, because
Didn't have a lot of world class stuff used to get from him.
yeah, world class, and AWA as well. And that guy recorded everything. He literally recorded everything that he was able to get at that time period too.
Even Silk Stockings, because it came on after Raw. Do you remember that?
I do.
Because you asked him, he had the catalog, like, you have everything here is wrestling, but then you have every episode of Silk Stockings. Oh, well, it came on after Raw.
Well, I think it did come out after Raw, or was it primetime wrestling? I don't remember.
I don't know. We have to look and
Yeah.
see. It was after some WWF wrestling program, so he just recorded it. Did he start recording La Femme Nikita too?
Yeah. You got me, because we're going back to the 80s and early 90s.
So this is another one. Look at this, is another Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
All right, Sergeant Slaughter.
Another great advertisement, something that was so big back then.
Which one's that? Oh, the body knows.
So 1-900 number. So yep. I mean, I'm sure he has a lot of conspiracy theories he could have told you about, right? If you called up.
So my thing is this, with the 1-900 numbers.
Yeah.
Did you ever call any of those 900 numbers? And did your parents ever give you permission?
I called two. I have a funny story. One is not the first one I ever called was not wrestling related. It was for Star Trek 5. For Star Trek 5, and it was like behind the scenes. And so just the ad came on. I'm like, oh wait, I'm trying to memorize the number, calling it up, and it went to some woman's like mailbox for like some dating thing. So I'm like, all right. So I just hung up the phone quick, and my mother never mentioned it. I never said anything to her, so I'm sure she just like disputed it. But then I did call a wrestling hotline. This you're gonna laugh at. I got suckered into this. This was a big angle at the time. Brian Pillman's 1-900 number. Do you remember that by any chance?
Maybe. What year was this?
Right after he got into that Humvee wreck, and he came back, came back in the crowd, like he was like in WCW sort of. I want to think that's like the memory. There was like somebody holding up a sign that had like the number, like 1-900 Pillman or something like that. Like, I gotta call this, to see what's going on.
You seemed a little too old to be doing this.
Yeah, how old was I? Like 20 or 21 or something?
Jesus, dude.
Yeah, so it's like 21. I'm like, I gotta see what's going on with Brian Pillman, the loose cannon. What's he doing? And I called up, and like it was and then I realized that I got bamboozled. I'm like, listen, and he's stretching this out for as long as he can to say nothing, and just like and the powers that be, and it's like rambling on. I'm like, after like 3 minutes, like, all right, I'm not paying this. This is like I'll be on it for an hour until I actually get anything from him. It
was a $1.99 per minute.
Yeah, it was like, and then it was cheaper at each additional minute, whatever it started. I think they got you. Does this say this doesn't have a price on it? This says $2 per minute for the Jesse one.
Jesus.
So, but why did you ever call any?
Well, yeah, I got another funny story.
All
Yeah,
right.
I was way younger than that. I was about 12, 13 years old. I think I called the WCW hotline.
Okay.
And every day they had something different. So every day for about a week I called.
Did your parents yell at you? I'm going to assume.
It was about a month later when they got the bill. And they were like, "Why is our bill so high?" Blah blah blah. Because I would and then the worst part about it is they try to bamboozle these kids they start the conversation in the middle of the conversation when you call. So it was like one of those things you had to wait for it to restart. So of course, there you go. There's how the time adds up. And I did that as a kid, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this sucks." And I call and then hang back, or I'd hang up and then call back. And I did this for about, maybe 3-4 days in a row. And then my parents got the bill like the following month, and they came in and asked me, and well, I had to pay them back. I had to do extra chores around the house for them to so yeah.
But yeah, they were great, and I remember Mean Gene hyped one up about a blonde former world champion passed away. Do you remember this? And then it was like Jerry Blackwell.
Was he ever blonde? Like
I don't know. Was he the Sheik?
Was he a world champion?
Yes. I don't know. Right? I'm not sure, but it was something like that. But I think it was Jerry Blackwell. I forgot what the terminology was, but it made it out like you're thinking, like, wait, did Hulk Hogan die? Like you're thinking, like a blonde, right? When you say something like that, it was that or Ric Flair, like the first two people that pop in your head, right?
Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. There is no pictures of Jerry Blackwell online.
We have to look this up and see. Is my memory off? It was a blonde. I want to say it was a blonde world champion was the line. So we gotta look into this. And the other one, the ECW hotline. That I remember Paul Heyman said you got to find out who slipped Missy Hyatt to kielbasa. Do you remember this?
Yes,
and got her pregnant. That was another one to get you to buy this. To call the hotline.
I want to know how well the ECW hotline did. Do you think it?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. And of course, the trading card game was not what it was either back in the day. Now today is all this stuff that we're talking about. Well, besides the what's that called stuff? Since the hotlines. Okay. Hotlines don't exist, right?
Yes.
Wrestling magazines barely exist. Well, we got websites for the hotlines and magazine stuff. And back then, the wrestling trading card game was nothing. There was very few of them. Baseball cards, football cards, hockey, sports cards were very popular, but at the same time, they dwindled down in the 90s. But today, sports cards are through the roof. There's just craziness, alterations, blah blah blah. Do you remember the Wrestling All Stars card series?
I have them all. These are the ones from like '82.
Yeah, they came out with like various different colors: blue, red, yellow, stuff like that. And I remember going through those, and I think that I had some, and I think you had more of them. But I thought that they were so damn interesting. Some of the names that had trading cards come out with them.
Those you could only get those through the wrestling programs, right? If I'm not mistaken,
probably.
I think that's how you can obtain them.
And a lot of them seem like they were actually like a lot of Southern wrestlers as well. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah, like there's Jerry Lawler. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Who else is there? There's Terry Funk. But I'm trying to think of the more oddball. Steve Alanowski. All right, like there's a card of him. But yeah, no, those are interesting. We could talk about that in the future one day. The wrestling cards.
Here's the Steve Alanowski card. Okay.
Yes. Why they make a trading card of him is what you're thinking, right?
Well, ask him. He's on the jump on the AWA Unleashed podcast.
All right.
I'm sure you can find. But this is JSA certified. Okay. All Stars Series A, 1982, or PSA. Excuse me. $299 it's going for online. So it's
all about the grade with these things. You get a higher grade.
I mean, it's mint. Here's the Hulk Hogan one. It's selling for $1.80. So go figure.
Well,
but
that's not. I mean, there's counterfeits of those too. There's like counterfeits of Flair and Hogan that people get, and they try and get those to get them signed and then slab them to resell.
Yep. Let's look at the Tommy Rich one. I have that one. Oh, hang on. I'm trying to enlarge it here. You can't see the price on it, so never mind. Let's see if I can open the listing. So
there's
there's no way that Tommy
there's
Rich is selling.
There's a Rene Goulet too, isn't there?
Yeah. I believe there's a little bit of everything, or a lot of wrestlers that were not necessarily. It was pre WWF. There was cards, there of guys that pre WWF, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. So this is when you're talking about before. This is still relevant today. These arena reports.
Yes. Well, I mean, how relevant are they if you think about it? Like, where do they go other than what do they do? Cover an AEW show, cover a WWE show. They don't cover the wrestling magazines do not cover house shows as they barely exist in WWE and in AEW doesn't do house shows, period.
See, this is relevant and for historical purposes, the way I look at it. Like, you know what I mean? Nowadays, you look back.
Yeah. So what is it looking at that you're what are you looking at in that?
So this is, I mean, it starts alphabetical order. California. So this is a WWF show, Connecticut, Hartford, Survivor Series.
Okay.
As a result of that, District of Columbia, NWA card, but Terry Taylor beat Buddy Landell.
Has this got to be 89, 90, 91?
91.
Okay.
Florida, you have that. Blade Runner Hammer, if you're familiar with Blade Runner. So you see these names in here. Eddie Golden, The Outlaw, Bugsy McGraw. You know him, right? So, I mean, so you have a lot of, like, interesting independent, like, promotions in here. Penelope Paradise is mentioned.
I remember she just popped up on Facebook recently because she worked in Florida and I guess they're trying to promote her doing some wrestling related stuff currently.
Yeah, so I mean, there's another interesting on Tampa PWF card.
Yeah,
Steve Curran battled Lou Perez to a 1 hour draw. Jim Backlund, isn't that
Jimmy Del Rey, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and Frankie Lancaster.
Whoa! Frankie Lancaster doesn't answer his phone or make return calls.
So I mean, Mark Starr is on the card.
I just want to thank Wendell Kool-Aid for giving me his phone number and trying to get me in touch with him. So
yeah, so it's really cool nowadays looking at these arena reports. But back then, I had no idea. Like, I'm learning who some of these wrestlers were back then because I never heard the names before.
I liked Lou Perez. I read about him in magazines. And then I didn't, of course, they showed pictures of him. He looked like a dead ringer for Al Perez, kind of. But I didn't see him until I think he hit WCW in 1990, I think. And then, he would team up with Brad Armstrong against the Nasty Boys in a really good tag team match. That dude was lightning quick. They didn't just call him Lightning Lou Perez for nothing. He was a really, really good wrestler. And Jimmy Backlund, I remember reading about at the time. And there's another name you mentioned there that I don't necessarily can't think of. But that's like in WCW in 1990, they were bringing in some of those guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Texas Wrestling Federation, Cowboy.
That might have been. That might have been. Let me Google that real quick while we.
Steve Austin was on the card.
I think that was Gary Hart, if I remember correctly. Trying to after World Class closed, USWA was in existence, and Gary Hart owned it from 1991. Yes,
if you a lot of like World Class guys, Iceman, King Parsons.
Yeah, it was like the in between period, so to speak. There's some TV episodes because they filmed inside a bar, and if I remember correctly, Bill Mercer was doing the commentary, and some of the episodes are up on YouTube. You can go watch them, and it's sad because it's like with the amount of actual talent that they have on these television shows, there's nobody in the crowd.
Yeah,
it's awful because it looks. Here's Iceman Parsons, going against Steve Austin, Billy Joe Travis, Angel of Death. It had so much damn potential to be something great. It was such a weird time period for Texas wrestling, you know?
This is very interesting. It has the complete results of the last world class card.
Okay.
11-23-90. So, I mean, Mike Davis pinned Dog of War, Chris Von Erich pinned Kevin Dillinger, Percy Pringle accidentally hit Dillinger. So, Percy Pringle was there. Iceman Parsons pinned Tom Jones, Sweet Brown Sugar and Steve Dane defeated California Stud and Gary Young. Wow, Steve Simpson pinned John Tatum in a lumberjack match. Kevin Von Erich defeated Angel of Death by disqualification. So, that was the last match by disqualification.
Interesting. And I know that Kevin tried to run a world class card like shortly after to try to revitalize it after world class and USW was absorbed by the USWA. And I guess it just wasn't successful at all. He tried to run
at that point you just had to pull the plug, you know.
Yeah. So there's so much great wrestling from when we were kids, and the magazines, and you know, it was I loved watching Texas wrestling. I've said this like multiple times on the show, getting home from school and watching World Class on ESPN every day after school.
They play the older episodes, right? The older matches. Yeah.
And then you'd get it on syndicated television on some random, I don't remember the station that we would get it up on here, but then, you know, AWA would play Saturday nights on ESPN too. So we were exposed to a lot of great wrestling that it's just different nowadays, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What else, Rick? Anything else you want to talk about in these magazines?
It's, you know, like I said, there was the pinups, there's the ranking. The rankings were always a favorite. The results, you know, going from town to town, you'd find out about some smaller organizations that you never really knew about, but never would hear about again. You try to find videotapes of them in you know, and it'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting hunt in itself. But yeah, I mean, I just remember the. Do you remember the Von Erich family album being photo album being advertised in the?
No.
In the it was like it was a book that was for sale, for years and years and years on the whatchamacallit, in the magazine. So I remember that. And I remember that, of course, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated t-shirts. And then, like you said, that there was that replica WCW belt at the time that just looked ridiculous.
What do you mean? The foam belt or no?
Yes.
Yeah, there's advertisements for that. Yeah, for the foam belts. There's also advertisements for the WWF LJN figures, if you remember, because they weren't selling them in the United States anymore. The last series, like just basically Canada was getting them, but some guy from New York, some company, was at the Wrestling Ring, I think. It might be the same company selling those NWA belts.
Okay.
And they're like $16.95 each in like 1990, which is a lot of money. But some of those now, what they go for is like ridiculous, right? If you want like,
oh god, yeah,
you know, like the last series.
Well, that was was that the King Haku series, like one that came out?
Yeah. So that last series, like the Rick Rude, all those, like and those are advertised. You can get those in the magazines.
That's just wild. Let's see. I'm going to go through some other magazines. We still have a few more minutes, and if you remember any of these off the top of your head, let's see. Do you remember we talked about Sports Review Wrestling, right? From London Publishing, 1973. I said, no, I'm sorry, I lied. 1972 to 1995. And this was the magazine that popularized apartment wrestling from 1973 to 1983.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good claim to fame.
I if you want to put it that way. Okay. So Victory Sports 1972 to 1989. This one I also read. Wrestle America, whenever we get it. See, this one we didn't always get this one. It was 1992 to 1999. And I remember probably discovering this on a road trip with my grandparents out in somewhere. And I picked up an issue, and it was just, it was just another magazine out there that provided a lot of the WWF, WCW content, and you'd get the occasional other items in there, like the whatever smaller companies that there were. See, after 1991, it was really only WWF and WCW for quite some time in the mainstream wrestling because the AWA had closed. I think the magazines would cover USWA still, but ECW was not really a thing at that time period. It
No,
wasn't.
yeah. Well, the USWA just because WWF had that partnership, right? And that's why they had
Well,
like, sort of
even
right. Is
before.
that the reason why you
Well,
say?
even before that, because it was like it was the world class was absorbed by
Okay, and then
USWA, and then obviously it was the long running Memphis territory
mhm.
that. So I mean, and all those magazines covered Memphis for many years. Of course, it was wrestling. This one always went by year. Wrestling 84, Wrestling 85, Wrestling
Mhm.
86. It was always every year is just wrestling in whatever year it was up until it lasted. That one I thought was a cool one because it just the layout I thought was really cool. The layouts to some of these magazines I thought were pretty amazing as well. Like the covers were always what got me. If I saw Lex Luger on the cover of a magazine, I wasn't buying it normally. Of
Really?
course, now, yeah, I wasn't the biggest Lex fan. But of course, as an adult, I really it doesn't bother me now as much.
Yeah. Oh, I do want to bring another mag. We talk about how WWF had their own magazine. Then later on, WCW said, "Well, now we're going to come out with our own magazine." So they came out with just a WCW
Well,
magazine.
I was discussing this earlier today with Eric Hunting. That episode will be up. Came out yesterday. It's uh WCW created the Wrestling Wrap Up, which is
Yes.
WCW
Now
Wrestling Wrap
that
Up.
was only for arenas, correct? You can only get those like a
No,
no a mail
I
order too, right? Like a
Yep.
mail order.
You couldn't be able to find it in stores, and I don't know, maybe you did somewhere else.
Okay.
WCW wasn't a popular thing out here in the Northeast. I subscribed to it. I actually wrote a letter as a kid, and it got published in
Okay.
the and it said Rick from New Haven, Connecticut in it.
All
So
right.
I subscribed to that. All right, can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, you look like you're in a carnival mirror.
Hang on a second.
You're
Hang
gonna do
on.
magic editing for this.
Yeah, apparently so. All right.
What happened? The power die or?
No, I got a fucking phone call. I thought I put my phone on do not disturb, and apparently I didn't. All right, what was I mentioning before I got kicked off?
Oh, wrestling
Wrestling
wrap
wrap up.
up.
Okay. So the wrestling wrap up, WCW's magazine. I subscribed to that. I got like 6 to 8 issues. My mom ended up taking them away from me at one point.
Wait, were you punished and or the punishment was taking away your wrestling wrap ups?
Yes.
One time, this is a great Rick story. He was
Oh
punished
God.
once, and they took away all his wrestling videotapes.
Yes. Wow.
That was
I
hysterical.
got in trouble, and I don't know why. I had like a million wrestling magazines, or million, and I was a dumb early teenager at times. You know what I mean? My parents thought I watched too much
Hey,
wrestling.
he's
So,
25.
all right, whatever. That's not true. Did you ever have any kind of incident like that? So,
It's a good question. I mean, probably younger, maybe taking my toys away, maybe, but yeah, not
yeah.
not that much.
No.
Not that, or like the punishment. This is like the worst punishment. You have to stay in your room all day. Okay, gee, I have everything in my room. I got a TV. I have comic books.
Yeah.
Whoop, it was terrible. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
That was the worst.
Yeah, wrestling wrap up. I had one issue I got from NWA house show.
Okay.
What was that? 89 or whatever when they came to
Probably.
New Haven.
Yeah, they came
The
into
only
New
issue I
Haven
ever
twice.
had.
Yeah. I thought it was a very interesting magazine, and I love the catalog, looking at the catalog.
Oh, yeah.
That there, because to me it was better. I think I had one with Tom Zank on the cover, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was a cool magazine, and just
it was like thin, right? I mean, that's what it wasn't. It wasn't like a thick magazine, right? It was like a fold. It was like 11 by 14, 11 by 17 that folded, right?
Probably, yeah. And it was probably like, I don't know, 10, 15 pages, something like that. Yeah. It wasn't like
a program, how programs had minimal, information in it.
It wasn't
articles.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly WWE magazine, WWF magazine, but WCW that closed down, and then eventually WCW put out a magazine a little bit later on as well.
And here's one of during the dying days.
Yeah. Oh wow.
With the Misfits.
Wow.
Not Misfits in action, the real Misfits.
The real Misfits. Well, hold on a second. Yeah. Hold on.
But this is the best for the merchandise you could buy. I want this Conan pennant.
See, the thing is, and no offense to the guys, some of these guys that they made merchandise of, I just don't get.
Okay.
How they made merchandise. Who was going to be out there and be like, man, I really need that Conan pennant.
A Conan pennant, of all things.
Yeah.
Not a t-shirt, a pennant. Like, that's like so random, I think.
Well, that's the thing, is like they would do that for like random guys at that time period in the late 90s. Like, it's just, who would think to be like, I really need this?
And this is, speaking of, like, this is a great article about Lex Luger and Elizabeth vacationing together.
Oh.
So, I mean, this is
yeah. I'm sure everybody needs to read that.
Throwing a snowball. They're having a snowball fight. So this is the great journalism in the WCW magazine. Now I got to get more back issues now.
Where'd you find that one?
I had for years. I was just going through my magazines and I just pulled this out. I might have actually, this one I might have gotten from Jerry Only. He was giving these out for free at Chiller Theater. I'm not kidding.
Oh, interesting.
Because the Misfits are in it. I don't know if he got like 1,000 copies for free or something, but he's giving them out to people.
That's interesting. Very interesting. I remember that, but that should be a whole nother episode in itself. Misfits in WCW.
Yeah. Oh, look at this thing. You see this? The credit card.
Yes.
Kevin Nash credit card. So
yeah, because that's something everybody wants, is a Kevin Nash credit card. So
yeah. So that was, and then later on, so with the wrestling promotion magazines, later on, ECW had a magazine. It was Wow magazine, also. Yep. That same company made it, I think, right? Like
it was published. They looked identical. They looked identical.
With the World of Wrestling, right? They covered, was that who worked for that? Was it also people from
Bill Apter? Bill Apter, I think, worked at there.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was still the internet still didn't really. I mean, I didn't get
still at that point.
2000. I don't know about you getting internet access, so it was still.
Yeah. It was still at the
like late 90s. People were still reading magazines. They were still selling well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Johnny, is there anything else that you want to throw out there? Final memories that you want to throw out there about these magazines?
No, I mean, but it was a really fun time. It kind of, like I was joking around before about like driving around, like to try and find some of these magazines. If we can, like,
That's true, though.
Yeah. I had to get my grandfather to bring me to the newsstand to talk about an Amity to buy some of this stuff. You kind of like, it's not like today how just everything's at your fingertips. If you wanted something, you really had to go out of your way for this stuff, especially like if I'm 12 years old, I didn't have any money. That's why I had to stay.
You couldn't drive.
Store reading for an hour because I didn't have the money to buy these at times. If I was lucky, I'd get these my dad would get one or what have you.
You know who had a really good newsstand is that every time I'd go out to like my uncle's house, was he lived in Naugatuck, Connecticut, the Naugatuck Valley Mall. They had a like
Oh,
one of
okay.
those like
I remember that.
newsstands in the middle of the
Yep, yep.
thing, and their wrestling magazine selection was like top notch. I mean, they had
Oh,
everything, and they had piles of them, and it was amazing
yeah, that was good
to go
stuff.
through.
I could I give just one plug?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I know you love my brother. He
Oh,
has
jeez.
a podcast called Star Pod Log. It's on, wherever you get your podcasts, audio podcasts. Episode 45, the latest episode, I have a segment about wrestling of 1985. So he's covering things from 1985, the music, sci-fi movies. I also do a segment on A View to a Kill, James Bond movie. So if you like what you hear, just give that a listen. I appreciate it.
I do recommend people going to listen to the podcast. It is a fun podcast. So check that out. John, I want to thank you again for joining me here this week.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Anytime, and hopefully soon we'll talk about Super Clash 2, right? That or whatever subjects. We'll talk about a few different things in it.
I've got a whole list of retro stuff here that I want
All right.
to bring you back for. So we'll
All
talk.
right, sounds good.